Content warning, this episode contains graphic depictions of war crimes during the Vietnam-American War, and there are also some depictions of suicide. It's the Forever Knight-A-Thon Season 2! We're recapping and reviewing every single episode of Season 2 of the 1990s Canadian police procedural Forever Knight, about a vampire detective taking a bite at a crime. Season 2, Episode 11, Can't Run, Can't Hide, opens with an errand boy doing some deliveries for this fine man who seems to have some paranoid delusions as he clutches a shotgun, ready to blast anyone who crosses his path. He asks the kid about whether he managed to contact Casey Brooks for him, but the kid hasn't managed it yet, which only agitates the man further. The boy leaves, and then the guy gets immediately killed. So I guess he wasn't paranoid. I don't know. The boy is brought in for questioning, and he tells Nick and Skankomatic about how the murdered guy was always asking for this Casey Brooks person. Real horny for this Casey Brooks guy. You want to crack this case? I'd recommend you ask Casey Brooks what he knows. One problem though, Casey Brooks is a well-respected parole officer who's very well connected. He's a fixture of the community with a sterling reputation, so Captain Cohen wants them not to stick their snoots into his business. They immediately bring their snoots down to the youth center where he works, and So there's all these at-risk youths waiting around for Casey, and they're like, hey, where's Casey? He's really late. He's probably not coming. Maybe we should leave. And then Casey rappels from the roof with climbing gear and is like, aha, I was here the whole time. On the streets, you have to be ready for anything. That's the lesson of this stunt. And it's that type of innovative teaching method that really gets through to these kids, you know? They learned from that, so that what they learned is that what you shouldn't do, what it would be wrong to do is leave an appointment simply because it seems like the other party won't come. Like if they're so late that you think maybe they're not coming, you shouldn't leave, because if you do that on the streets, I don't have to tell you what would happen. Nick takes one look at Brooks and remembers meeting him before, in a past life. In flashbacks, we see that Nick was a Red Cross volunteer in Vietnam during the Vietnam-American War, giving kids vaccines. Nighttime vaccines. Brooks and his squad burned down the village Nick was working in and killed a bunch of innocent people. They did so on the suspicion that the villagers were protecting some enemy combatants. Brooks, under a different name, was prosecuted for this crime and spent some time in American prison before moving to Toronto to start over. While he commanded the unit and bears a lot of responsibility for the massacre, he himself didn't directly cause it. He just kind of froze as the situation escalated and didn't act quickly enough to calm things down, resulting in a bloodbath. Turns out, someone has been hunting down and killing everyone from his unit one by one. So it seems likely this is some sort of revenge for the horrible war crimes they committed. That just seems to fit. Nick has a sinking feeling he can't shake about this whole situation because also in Vietnam at this time, and this is worth noting, a one Lucien LaCroix. LaCroix, as a Frenchman, wanted to protect the plantations he owned in the area and also to ever so slightly gorble some of those civilians. Who's gonna notice, right? You can take a little bit of their blood. I mean, they're probably gonna get killed in the war anyway. And that's a level of villainy that makes it super uncomfortable that the last time we saw LaCroix, Nick and he were acting chummy. Like they had a little heart-to-heart and it was sweet and nice. And then in this episode, we find out that he's gorbling sick children in a war-torn nation in the service of protecting his colonialist properties. But even he was disgusted by the massacre. Even he seemed angry about it. Mostly because they also burned down his plantations, but also the innocent people. That's bad too. Nick stops by the Raven and asks Jeanette if LaCroix ever made any Vietnamese vampos. And she doesn't really know. So he goes directly to LaCroix, who's like, yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, I did. I made one of the villagers a vampire so he could kill those guys. Why? Nick's like, oh, that's another fine mess you've gotten us into, LaCroix. The war criminals are being murdered now. And LaCroix's like, sick. But Nick doesn't think it's sick at all. He thinks Brooks has changed his ways and is trying to make amends. And the question we are meant to be asking during all of this is, can Brooks be redeemed? Is it possible to do something as heinous as he did and then change? Nick wants it to be possible, but as LaCroix points out, that's kind of selfish on his part. He wants Brooks to be redeemed because that means that he too can be redeemed. And LaCroix is not wrong, really. Nick doesn't get to decide this on behalf of Brooks' victims. It's not his place. So this is the vampire killing all the war criminals. Nick and Brooks confront him in a dirty warehouse. Brooks wants closure on whether or not the village was hiding any Viet Cong. The vampire guy admits, like, yeah, I was Viet Cong, but like, so what? That doesn't change anything, man. The people who died were all innocent non-combatants. Like, you don't get to kill innocent people just because you had the suspicion that there was one Viet Cong guy in the village. Brooks, his unit, the entire American military for that matter, were unequivocally in the wrong. Brooks agrees, it seems, and turns his gun on himself. In doing so, he proves that he was different, and he dies on his own terms, trying to give closure to the only remaining survivor of the massacre he failed to prevent. He can't bring back the man's family, but he can accept this man's justice. That leaves Nick and this other vampire kind of unsure about where they sit. Like, are they still fighting? Are we good? The other vampire remembers the good work Nick did for his village and tells him to stand back. He opens the warehouse door and walks into the sunlight, immolating himself, his work having been done. And I like that ending for the character because it really underscores the strength of his principles. He won't live as a monster. He only allowed himself to become a monster in order to get rid of worse monsters. There is a complicatedness to this story that makes it so much more powerful than it could have otherwise been. It asks some pretty interesting questions about the nature of justice, about what it means to be a better person, which people in your life you owe loyalty to, how we respond to generational trauma. Some of those questions are left deliberately unanswered, of course, because there are no answers to those questions, but they also don't cop out. They do offer a pretty conclusive answer to the question of whether or not it's possible for people who've done horrible things to change. Yeah, they can, obviously, but it might not matter. You can change. It's never too late to change, but sometimes it is too late to be forgiven. Some crimes are beyond redemption. You cannot undo the damage you've done, but that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to try, which is, of course, also kind of what the entire show is grappling with. We know Nick is a good person with good intentions now, and we know he helps people and saves lives now, but would that matter to any of the people he killed in the past? They're already gone. He can't make it up to them. If Nick can't be redeemed, should he behave differently? Would it make it permissible for him to return to his wicked ways? I don't think so. That would make the process of seeking redemption inherently self-serving, something one does to clear their conscience or assure their place in heaven, rather than out of genuine concern for the well-being of others. And at that point, have you really changed? Or did you just calculate that being good was better for you personally than being evil? Brooks, at least, does make a sacrifice. It's too little too late, but he proves his change was motivated by genuine remorse. And so, we hope, is Nick's. Tomorrow, Nick needs to stop a gang war, but this actress lady keeps getting in the way. What a wacky thing to be happening tomorrow, and it doesn't at all suit the tone of this video that's rather somber because it's about a historical tragedy. I want to give a special thank you to my web puppets over on Patreon. We've got Wolfman Jack, Cooper Holmes, Joe McClory, Liz Widow, C.H. Phillips, Gideon, David Kaler, and Andrew Roger. And I, Bobby Duke, the star of the channel, would like to thank these other people who's also the stars of the channel. We got Jay Torney, Connor Patrick Griffin, Rachel Ratt, Kato Moore, Carpad, Josh Manes, and Hyla Tracy. Hope you're enjoying this Forever Night shit that Mildo insists on doing every year. I don't really get it myself. I don't know, I'm trying to reduce my screen time. That's just me, though, you know? Like, who cares about some show from the 90s nobody's ever heard of?